As a narrative device, Awakenings can be one of the coolest things you can add to your universe. And while JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has awakenings slash evolutions in a sense, I don't think we've ever truly addressed it. The first stand awakening had been Star Platinum, where we had found out that Jotaro and Dio truly had the same stand. Dio had made Jotaro's journey to him extremely difficult, but through adversity, Dio had indirectly created the exact opposition that had defeated him. Then we have the Act stands, who evolve each time a large character moment happens to the stand user. Even the stands that have evolved due to the arrow only occur when a large moment happens. But I feel like there are times where someone had reached such a large stride in the story, and you would think that a further power would have been unlocked, but I'm fine with that not being the exact case, unless all signs have sort of pointed to it. Well, what do I mean exactly? Josuke Higashikata in his stand Crazy Diamond, for example. Now his potential stat is at a C. The lower the rating, the more complete your stand is in terms of mastery, and the higher the rating, that means that the more room that you can tap into it. If Josuke is in the dead center, he had more to activate. The thing is, I don't understand how he didn't find more, because if we're proposing that he learned more with Jotaro specifically, and maybe some more off screen, but I guess in this case it has to take more. It's possible that he doesn't know what he's supposed to be pushing to be able to unlock it. He essentially has a skill tree that he can unlock, but he doesn't know that he has this skill tree. And I think that's the same idea as any other stand user, which I'd say is an almost interesting type of beautiful idea. But this puts it into question, well, what about all these other stand users that have reached this E in potential? Emperor? That makes sense. Like, Whole Horse seems like a user who has reached his peak of ability for a long time, but his only ability is that his bullets can home in on their targets. Is it possible that Emperor had originally just been a gun stand alone, and the homing part had been the additional power? Maybe. But I think it's possible that maybe sometimes you've missed your window for development. Dio had a largely better Hermit Purple due to Jonathan's body being essentially preserved in its peak, but Joseph is an old man now, and his Hermit Purple has an E. And there are a lot of stands that we know that have an E in potential, but not much about them besides that, and that their ability that we know them for. Bastet, Superfly, Cheap Trick, Talking Head. But then there are some cases where you do have to consider the design philosophy behind it. White Album, for example. White Album must have actually awakened the next step of whatever efforts that Gyachao had gone through, because this stand has Gently Weeps. And I think that's a key example of this next step of your stand. On the same team though, with La Squadra, we have Aluzo and his Man in the Mirror. No extra additions to the stand, as it seems just straightforward with the mirror world and everything. I mean, I could be missing something, but I don't really see a secondary ability happening here. Echoes 1 through 3 has an A in its stats, and then you have Tusk Act 1 through 3, who also have an A. But I understand where it would change, as its fourth act would probably mean that's where it's all wrapped up, because, you know, Tusk actually had something to work with. And Koichi, who existed in Golden Wind, for example, he only got up to 3 still, which is pretty interesting. It's like, yeah, we brought the guy over, but, you know, room for Echoes Act 4 just didn't happen. I guess not enough important moments in that instance, so I guess that probably makes sense. That tracks. This is becoming a whole thing about consistency, because we're gonna spin back to Diamond is Unbreakable again. Killer Queen, for example. I definitely have thought that Killer Queen had been a stand that had developed over the many years that Kira had been using it, and that's how we got Sheer Heart Attack. But all 3 areas of Killer Queen have an A in development. The original, Sheer Heart Attack, and even Bites the Dust. An A? Like, what else are we supposed to be developing? Chariot Requiem had an A, and that makes sense because it's an unfinished stand. I completely understand that, but what's going on with Killer Queen's area? You know, assessment aside, I think you get the idea. stands can evolve on their own if they do have this latent potential inside. I think the stat itself is supposed to be an example of that. But to tap into that, the requirements are finicky. In the case of Jotaro Kujo and even Josuke 8, they both needed another party to inform them of the power that they could be capable of. As for what that power could be, I guess that's something entirely separate. The design philosophy of the world can make you understand for as to why something like this can control time. It literally has gears on its body. But looking at Star Platinum, this doesn't really tell you anything about its power. And say that Gyachao's Gently Weeps is his awakened ability. That falls in line with his current ability of cryokinesis. If we're to have other stands that got further development with powers to match, I think that would be good if they correlated at least a good bit more than whatever the heck's going on with Star Platinum. And while I do believe that there's a sense of thematic symbolism when it comes to these latent abilities coming to life, I do think that there has to have been a couple of enemy stand users that had to have gotten to that point, unless awakening your next abilities is something like a chosen qualification in one's life or something before that, like Conqueror's Haki in One Piece, for example. Like maybe this was something that you were bound to do in the future. It seems specific. Anubis, maybe, right? Been alive for 500 years. Dio had found Anubis in a museum, but there had to have been some sort of grace period or something between the user dying and then being put up in the museum. But there's probably not enough time for the user to evolve its power. So I guess I understand the stat in this merit. Stone Free. I was shocked that she didn't get a final form. Even if she was supposed to lose to Pucci anyways, like say that we built up to this and it was just a, oh man, this was a harder fought 1v1 and then she loses. Like, I'd get it because it's been such a long journey, and the closest thing that she got in terms of this next power up had been the Mobius strip application of her stand. But I don't really think that counts as like a secondary ability. That's just, you know, more understanding of it. Gently Weeps, all while being an understanding of the ability, it feels like a label, you know, like something you could put onto it and something you could list on like a superpower wiki or something. And, you know, with that, her fight probably would have been longer too, and it would have been better, but I don't know. I guess we'll never know. Let's put that off. But speaking on Stone Ocean too, when we're going to talk about these A's and potential, Made in Heaven has an A in potential. What the heck? What else is it supposed to learn? You're telling me that the stand could have gotten worse for everyone else? That's wild. Can we think of what else it would do to have further its potential? As time is supposed to be linear and we only move forward, you know, with the exception of Bites of Dust and Mandem, or more so scientific sense, Made in Heaven Awakened would be able to do what? Accelerate its other attributes? In a biological sense? Probably not. That'd be ridiculous. It wouldn't make any sense. Rewrite itself? I'm not sure. It just seems odd to even think that this was a possible thing. D4C is another case where asking the question, you know, well, what's going on with this developmental potential stat? Another A. Valentine not only has multiple versions of him that would have had the ability to think about their powers in a different light. They have multiple perspectives. They have time to work with. There's just all sort of angles that you could have got there. But all of these funny Valentines, the multiple deaths he's experienced, there's no furthering his ability besides knowing that the whole like, oh yeah, if you merge two people together, boom, they explode. Like nothing past that. Really? It's pretty odd. Like, why wouldn't we just put this at like a C at least? What's the point of putting it at an A? I understand that the easy narrative thing is to be like, oh, Caleb, but stand stats don't make sense. Well, the guy wrote it. Like, Araki put these things down and wrote them down. And I feel like he's really intensive with everything else about his design philosophy. So this specific area not really making sense is pretty ridiculous, no? Like, it just seems odd to me. But it makes me just go back to this, like, theory that I had before, like I mentioned earlier with, like, not exactly the Conqueror's Haki area, but more so about experiencing it and experiencing with others. If characters like Jotaro and Josuke are the only ones who have awakened their true abilities, that's an extremely steep requirement. That probably needed a good bit more foreshadowing to make any sense, as I think like this is just, it's a large thing, and to have it to only two of these characters, it's in the area of where I get where people say, oh man, is this an Aspel? I understand how that happens. It's not about condoning it. It's just about like I understand how it happens, because if there was a tad bit more foreshadowing, that would it's more easier on the eyes for the viewers. They wouldn't be having these comments. If certain things like Gyatchao's Gently Weeps or even Kei Nijimura's Freezing Wind had been told to the viewers as, you know, this is a concept of furthering your stand potential, I think that would be better. More telling us about like other stand users that have had this experience rather than have it be that much up to interpretation. Because if you leave this much open-ended stuff, or just more so addressing concept, like not addressing concepts that very much exist in your world through other characters, but not really for everyone at all, it brings a lot of questions to the table. And I think that's why I wanted to talk about this in specific. But I do wish there had been a sort of better approach for this, because stands have awakenings, but does it really feel like that? That's the more so question. But thank you all for watching. Hopefully I'll see you all on the next one. Until then, peace out and Godspeed.